I'm really excited about this lesson. You're going to learn something super important. One of the key core concepts of all programming languages that's really going to unlock a lot of power in your ability to make a computer do what you want it to do. So we've learned a lot already in our code.org lessons. We've learned about loops, we got repeat loops, we've learned how to nest those loops inside of each other to make really complex drawings in the artist. We've learned about if-then blocks. We've learned about while loops so that we can loop indefinitely until a certain condition is true. Well, today what we're going to talk about is a new block that code.org is going to give you, and this is something that all high-level programming languages have. In most languages they're called functions. Some other languages have a different word for it, but most languages call it a function. So a function is a chunk of code that you can repeat in different places throughout your code without having to copy that code again. So for example, if I pop over to code.org here, we're in lesson 11, the artist 3. I'm on bubble 2, and it says welcome to using functions which let you define new blocks. So what a function is, if I pop into my functions area of the workspace here, you can see it's a block that does many different steps inside of it. So instead of having to make a loop now, repeat 4 times, move forward, turn right, and having to code all this every time we want to draw a square, for example, well, why don't we just make a new block that has a name, draw a square, and every time we run that new block, it secretly, behind the scenes, does all this loop, the repeat for loop. That's the beauty of a function, right? It allows you to hide the details. Do you really need to know all the little details of drawing a square? You just want to draw a square, right? So now when I run this, of course, you see that it does draw a square. It's too big, but I can change the side length and fix that pretty quickly. So one block, right? I put in one block, added one number to feed into it, and I got a square. No loop, no thinking about the turns or the moves. It's pretty slick. Okay? So functions are super powerful. Functions let you forget about the details so that you can level up your programming and draw even more amazing things in the artist, for example. Okay? Now, one thing I got to note right away is that in typed JavaScript you cannot name a function draw a square with spaces in it. You can't put spaces in your name. Code.org will allow you to do this with the block-based stuff, but as soon as we switched over to type coding, you won't be able to do that anymore, just so you know. Now, functions need 2 different things. Code.org hides this from you at first, but really what's going on here is 2 different things. A function has a definition. The definition tells JavaScript, tells the computer, it tells it the name of the function, and it tells the computer what to do when you call the function. And the call is the other part. The call is you telling the computer, hey, I want you to run this function. So all we see here, this is just a call, okay? We're telling it, hey, I want you to run the draw a square function and do what that function does. So that's a call. Where's the definition, you say? Well, it's hidden. Code.org wants your first exposure to functions to be really simple. They're not showing you the definitions right now. You will get to see them later, and you will get to make your own functions with your own definitions. Now, yeah, they even hide it when you see the JavaScript too. Oh, no, they don't actually. If you hit show code, they actually translate that into the loop itself. They don't actually show the function definition. That's too bad. That's okay. But I want you to know ahead of time. There are 2 parts to a function. Now, functions can get even more powerful, right? We didn't just have a function that draws one square. We have a function that can draw any square of any length. Okay, and that's because this function has a parameter. Okay, the parameter in this function is called length. And when you have a parameter on a function, they don't all have parameters, but this one does. When you have a parameter in there, it allows you to give information to the function about how it should do its job, right? You can tell it the length that you want the square to be. So the beauty of having a parameter is that instead of just writing a function that draws one square, we have a function that can draw any square. That's huge. Okay. Now, a minor little detail here, you might also hear the word argument. And the argument is actually the number that you feed it. Okay, so draw a square has a parameter length, and in this top call, I have given it an argument of 100. And in the second call, I have given the length parameter an argument 250. So there's a little vocab for you. Let's take a little bit more closer look at the power of functions with parameters. When you throw a function into a repeat loop, okay, you can draw lots of shapes. So here's an example. If I throw this square into a repeat loop, I think it's going to be a turn of 120 if I'm not mistaken, because we got to get all the way around in 3 turns. Yeah, boom. Look how little code I had to write to draw this cool design, right? And that was all easy because of that draw a square function. Okay. The second thing, if you need to pause and play with this, go ahead, pop through these first few bubbles on lesson 11. Go ahead and pause. But when you get to lesson 6, bubble 6 rather, then Code.org is going to introduce a whole new concept to you, and you can go ahead and hit play when you're ready to hear about that. So what this is a new type of loop. Now Code.org calls it a counter loop. Okay. In JavaScript, it's a for loop. And what for loops do is it's a repeat loop, but it keeps track of how many times it's looped through. And the way it does that in Code.org is it stores that loop value in a variable called counter. There's a value called counter, and that counter is a number, and that keeps track of how many times it's looped through. But it's really flexible, right? It doesn't necessarily just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? You can tell it a starting value, an ending value, and the increment by which you want to count. So in this example here, we have the counter starting at 50, and we want it to count up to 90 by tens, right? So counter will start at 50, then 60, 70, 80, and then after 90 it will stop the loop. So that's pretty cool. Now the super duper power of these counter loops is you can actually use the counter value inside of the loop. And this opens up way more doors. Watch what happens when I do this. You go under variables, and here's that counter block. Remember, counter is a number. There's a number hiding inside of this counter block, and that number changes each time through the loop. So the first time through the loop, counter is going to equal 50. So it's going to draw a square of length 50. Then it's going to go back to the top of the loop again, and we're going to jump up by 10, because that's what I told it to do. So now the second time through the loop, it's going to draw another square, but this time counter is going to equal 60. Then another square equals 70, another square 80, and finally the last square will have a length of 90, at which point it will exit the loop and we'll be done. And this is what we get. So there's that first square, there's the second, third, fourth time through the loop, and the fifth time counter equals 90. Isn't that a cool design that we could draw with just a couple of blocks? Counter loops are really powerful, boy. When you play with them in the artist, you're going to find that you can make some amazing designs. Let's take one more look at the next bubble here. And I'm not going to give you the solution to this one per se, but I just want, this is a stumbling block for quite a lot of students who go through this course. On this bubble, they give you these grayed out blocks. They're showing you the code that it would take to draw this square spiral thingy over here. This is how you would need to code it with no loop. What they want you to do is make a counter loop. Okay. You have to figure out what blocks to put inside of there, figure out what's repeating over here in these grayed out blocks, right? And you have to figure out where you want the counter to start, where you want it to stop, and what it should count by. Some of these numbers in here should be replaced with the counter variable, right? Counter, remember, is a number, but it keeps changing. So what you want to do is look for the numbers in this pattern over here that change. Those ones should get the counter. If there's any numbers in there that don't change, well then don't use the counter variable. Just use a straight up number from the math bucket. Okay, so I hope that tip helps you on this bubble, and I hope you enjoy your adventures with functions and counter loops. It's really going to take you to the next level. Have fun.